Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. I'm absolutely delighted to invite as my special guest in this episode, Martin Popoff, who's a musicologist, rock expert, and his books are all over our house down here in Cornwall in the UK. I think the first one I ever bought was the 500 top heavy metal songs and then the 500 top heavy metal albums. But if you want to know what we're going to talk about today, those of you who are watching the video, the clue is on my T-shirt and all around the back of my wall. But Martin has written some fantastic books on Deep Purple, which I don't know if these are still in print, Martin, but they should be forever.
Yeah, not the old bio ones. That's almost the earliest books I've ever written. The Getting Tighter and Castle need a massive update and a rewrite and a fix. And so that's on the plate for to make a really nice single Deep Purple book out of all that stuff.
Well,
so because I've interviewed the band for like the last 5 albums. I've interviewed 1 or 2 people from the band for every single one of them. So I can do that, and I really have to someday. So
well, that'll be fantastic, and I'll be first in the queue. To get one of those. So what we're going to do today is we're going to run down our top 10 Deep Purple albums, live or studio, from 10 to 1. I don't know what Martin's going to pick, and he doesn't know what I'm going to pick, and we'll just see what happens and where we end up, and what some of you out there will go, well, where's that? Or some of you will think, oh, that's good to see that in there. But I'm sure there's going to be some surprises. So who wants to go first? You want to go first, Martin, or shall I?
Okay, sure. I'll go first, I guess. And yeah, I mean, just as a little bit of a spoiler alert, I actually don't have any live albums in my list because I basically, I look at the albums as like that's the work of art. Those are the songs put together at that time, blah blah blah, and there's enough to choose from. So I normally don't really put in live albums, but and that's a whole nother discussion with Deep Purple. The big rant I end up getting into with people about Made in Japan and all that. So. Anyways, so my first choice, I'm going to go with my number 10 choice. I'm going with Slaves and Masters. I liked your idea about, what Deep Purple albums do I tend to play a lot sort of thing. Yeah. So this one definitely fits in that category for me. This is one I actually play a lot. It's the one everybody forgets exists, right? It's 1990. It's a weird for years and years in my head. I always had it like it was like a late 80s, 88 album or something, but no, it's 1990, which is a very strange year to see a Deep Purple album come out. But obviously it's the Deep Rainbow album with Joe Lynn Turner. I love the production. I think the production is nice and billowy and pillowy and very analogy. I love the fact that it sounds like bent out of shape essentially. So it's very musical. It's not particularly heavy. It's got a little bit of that Egypto thing, but it's the soft foreigner version of it. So yeah, it's a record that I've appreciated more over the years and play it quite often. King of Dreams is definitely would be my favorite on here. It's the most perfect strangers-y kind of one. But yeah, I like most of the album, and it's and it's pretty crazy that you've got Richie, Joe, and Roger in the band, and just John Lord and Ian Pace who have never been in Rainbow kind of thing. So,
very true.
Yeah,
and Cut Runs Deep is a fantastic song, isn't it? And Wicked Ways. I think I always felt that the song, is it Fire, Ice and Dynamite, which didn't make it on.
I can't remember. I think there's another one too.
Slow Down Sister.
Something Sister. Yeah. That I thought was pretty good too. Yeah. There's a few. They did a little extra material for this. So.
Yeah, no, yeah. It is a good album. I saw them on that tour. Very, very good. Well, my number 10 is Stormbringer.
Okay.
Now, when this first came out, hot on the heels of Burn, I was bitterly disappointed being a young lad, thinking that what's happened to this band that I've just been to see live. They seem to have lost everything. They've turned left, and I thought they were not going to turn right or left. But as the years have rolled by, I kind of, with all Purple stuff, the albums that kind of, challenge me in a way, but with the diversity of the material, the light and shade, the different textures of the songs, this has slowly climbed up the list. Obviously, it's got the kind of great opening songs, Stormbringer, Lady Double Dealer, and Gypsy. But it's also now, as the years have gone by, I appreciate the kind of things that at the time, I didn't like Holy Man, and stuff like that. And highball shooter. But it's now, I feel, and it's also, it hasn't dated that much either. It feels like it's just as contemporary now as it was then. And of course, that vocal relationship between Coverdale and Hughes, they felt like they'd really come together, even if Ritchie Blackmore's interest was elsewhere at the time.
Nice. Yeah. I actually ranked all the studio albums just to put everything in order to figure out what my 10 would be. So I have in front of me where all of these are going to fit. And I had Stormbringer at number 15. So yeah, and I like it a lot. I mean, it's actually, yeah, you're right. It hasn't dated badly. It's always a good one to go back to because nobody knows those deep tracks that well. Yeah. So kind of cool.
Fantastic. So number 9.
Oh, yes. So my next choice, where is my copy? Oh, I guess I don't have it handy here. I'm going with House of Blue Light.
Oh,
I have one here. No. So I really like this period. Roger always talks about, we follow up a great album with one that didn't turn out so good. He says they fall into pairs that way and stuff. And occasionally, I suppose they do. And this one definitely got, a little bit less acclaim. But to me, I just find it to be okay. So maybe the songs aren't quite as good and bold and exciting as on Perfect Strangers, but I still find that this is a band trying really, really hard, working hard. I really like the production on it. I think they've got a little bit of modernity to what they're doing, mixed in with the usual. But the usual, I mean, it's not an egregious '80s album or anything like that. Yeah. I think Deep Purple did well to stay away from any of the big '80s production tropes. I don't think you hear it on this album. So to me, it's just a more sober and studied and detailed version of Perfect Strangers. Perhaps how King Crimson Beat is the less the less explosive version versus King Crimson Discipline. That sort of idea.
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed when it first came out. I don't know what I expected, but the opening song, Bad Attitude, is superb. And in fact, track 1, side 1 of any Deep Purple album. That's for any record companies watching, that should be your next compilation, track 1, side 1 of any Deep Purple album, because they all work. But that one is great. Yeah. And Mad Dog and Strange Ways and Spanish Archer with that fantastic guitar solo that you don't really notice until you've heard it a few times, just how over the top that solo is and how fantastic Blackmore is on it. But yeah, that's a very good choice. My next one, number 9, is actually more recent in some ways. It's Now What, with the Steve Morse period. Yeah. This, I suppose, could be seen as Purple's prog album. It's very. It came a long time after the Rapture album. There was that period when the band seemed to think, well, it's no point making records anymore. No one's interested. And I feel like they wasted all those years when they could have been, doing a lot more. But I think this is a superb album. It's the first one without John Lord. First one after John Lord's passing. And all the tracks on here, All the Time in the World, Blood on the Stone, Uncommon Man, Bodyline, Above and Beyond. I think it's a superb record, and I'd still play this one a great deal.
Cool. Yeah, I had that at number 14.
Oh,
out of 22. So I like it quite a bit as well. So my next choice is Burn. So we're at number 8. So I picked Burn. This is again, I guess this is like the Perfect Strangers, the most exciting version of the new version, where everybody's like, oh, what are they going to do, kind of thing, and they do a really good job of it. I mean, but I do feel it does fall down on side 2. I'm not a big what's going on here, Mistreated or A200 fan. But all of side 1 is amazing. And I like You Fool No One as well. When I did that Deep Purple song list, I think I had Burn number 1 out of the top 20. And I didn't get a lot of stick for that. A lot of people kind of agreed, and it's pretty cool that it's it's a Mark III song. So it's neat that Deep Purple could actually have a song that a lot of Purple fans agree is the greatest Deep Purple song of all time. It's explosive, fast, great riff. Spots for Ian to do all sorts of drumming. The 2 vocalists are going crazy. It's got the classical composed guitar solo in it. And I always loved Might Just Take Your Life. Our band in the 80s, we actually played that song live. Sail Away is really cool. So yeah, it's and you get these two amazing new vocalists that come out of, well, one comes out of nowhere and one comes out of more or less nowhere. So
yeah, well, I'll say that Burn is my favorite Deep Purple song as well of all time.
Okay.
I think it's fantastic. It's got everything, the riff that starts on its own, the drums come in, the riff carries on, then everything comes in together. There's almost a drum solo behind the verse. The lyrics are all sci-fi based, perfect what you want when it's a rock song. As you say, the solos are classically intertwined. It's got everything. The guitar solo, it's just, to me, it's the perfect rock song. And I think their finest, Richie's best riff, I think. Just perfect album. Well, my number 8 one is actually a live album, and it's actually this one, Come Hell and High Water. Now, I picked this one because I felt it was the last hurrah from Richie Blackmore. Now, it's taken from a couple of gigs, isn't it? Stuttgart in Germany, where he was on fire, and Birmingham, England, where he wasn't. But he's soloing on Enya from the Battle Rages On album, which had its moments. And I felt like this had got, great version of Perfect Strangers, and Child in Time sounded re-energized, which was a song that was kind of starting to feel as if it wasn't going to be in the set for much longer, which of course it wasn't. And of course the Burn riff actually surfaces in the live version of Speaking, when Richie was on form for that tour. So that probably won't be in many people's lists as being in their top 10, but I think it should have been a double. And the Birmingham stuff, they must have cherry picked that stuff, because I was there at that gig and it wasn't very good.
Okay. My number 7, I'm going with Whoosh, their last album, accepting the covers album. So 2020. So this is the third one with Bob Ezrin. I just think out of all the Bob Ezrin ones, I guess spoiler alert somewhat, but out of all of them, I would say this is my favorite, where, in this era, I find it a real pleasure that we really trust the band, that we consider them great artists and geniuses, and they know what they're doing. So when that happens and you don't like an album by a band doing that, it's because you put it on yourself and say, my personal taste, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there, don't go there, and all of a sudden you find 4 or 5 songs you don't like, right? But on Whoosh, I really love the detail, the meticulousness, I do like this strange production sound that they get with Bob, which is, you could debate till the cows come home how heavy it is, because in certain ways it's really heavy and in certain ways it's not. But I find, it's progressive, it's melodic, but at the same time, it's pretty heavy. I thought Throw My Bones is like one of my favorite of all of these new era songs. Like, they just throw all the best stuff about Deep Purple at that song. And which one? Step by Step and Nothing at All. The really proggy 3/4 time one.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And what Steve does on all these songs. So yeah, I just feel like this is the one out of all of them where they're just doing more songs that I like of this kind of version of the band.
Did you think at the time, because I also really, really love that album, did you feel at the time that they were winding down, that this could be the end? The font they chose for the logo, and the fact that they ended on, and the address wasn't it, as if they'd gone a full circle to 1968, as if, like, I thought it almost felt like they were coming to a full stop, because it was supposed to be the end of the end tour, wasn't it? Well, of course it isn't, because they're carrying on now. But did you feel as if they were coming into land, as if they were?
I don't know how to answer that, except that if I remember correctly, in talking to the guys, like I say, I mean, I don't know if that was one where I had 2 interviews or just one, but it didn't seem like anybody was talking that way. I think everybody still felt, creative, and they loved working with Bob. So I think they felt a creative renewal with Bob. But again, with all these guys, you're dealing with like 75-year-old vocal cords. That's the weak link in all these bands that we love, right?
Yeah, very true.
So Ian eventually is going to have to decide whether he's croaking too much and he can't sing or whatever. And it's fascinating watching all these guys who have that self-awareness and ones who don't have that self-awareness, and they just keep plowing on, right? So we'll see. Yeah. But yeah, I think unfortunately, but I love the fact that this is a creative band that likes writing songs and making music and likes you think of Ian and Roger with their little crossword puzzles, playing word games with each other and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. I always think with these bands, it's like, even if you don't want to go play live, there's certain bands that you wonder if their work ethic is screwed on right, that they would keep making records, because I think they could keep doing that.
Yeah, very, very true. Mine is Who Do We Think We Are, which was the end of an era for the Mark II lineup in 1973. And I know this is seen as the weakest link in the Mark II output. But I've always felt the production was superb, and the songs, outside of Woman from Tokyo, Mary Long, which I know is one of your favorite songs, Super Trooper, Smooth Dancer, which is another one of your faves, Rat Bat Blue, great keyboard solo and great groove and rhythm from the bass and the drums in the instrumental section, and Placing a Line, which when I first heard it, I thought, who's singing that? Because it sounded so different to how Gillan would have approached any other song vocally, and has done ever since. And Our Lady, which is unusual in that it's a Deep Purple song without any guitar solo or keyboard solo. But I've just found over the years, it's an album that it's mere 32 minutes of length that I've played a lot. I know the outtake Painted Horse sounds completely at odds. I'm glad they didn't include that. It doesn't sound like it would have belonged anyway. But yeah, Who Do We Think We Are, I think, is a misunderstood album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had that at number 13 out of 22. And, even that seems like I'm probably lying to myself, because at 12, I had Infinite, and 11, I had Bananas. And I probably really actually do like Who Do We Think We Are more than those two, but they're all pretty close. Sometimes I have this big battle between the modern era and just loving everything they're doing, like bang, bang, bang. Everything sounds great. I think this is a band that actually gets better over time and matures. And like Ian tries to argue, and he's one of the only guys I've ever heard argue that. It's like, well, why shouldn't we be getting better as we're getting more experienced and older, right? And it's like, and nobody else really thinks that in rock and roll. And I thought that was kind of neat. So, but yeah, I love that album as well. So my number 6, I'm going with Fireball.
Oh yeah.
I'm not crazy about the fact that it's only got 7 songs on it, and I've always kind of had it in for Strange Kind of Woman and Woman from Tokyo, frankly, because I just never liked that sort of boring verse idea and shuffle feels, and when vocal melodies kind of go along with the song. Like I just find both of them a little ordinary sounding, right? But of course, I love Fireball. I love No No No. Anyone's Daughter, I totally like, and all of side 2, I think, is really cool. Atmospheric, the Mule, and Fools, and then No One Came's just a good, strong rocker. I think for 1971, it's got a really good production as well. I think it's pretty darn good for 1971. It's not the greatest for, say, 1976 or whatever, but for 71, it's pretty good. But yeah, basically. And even Strange Kind of Woman. So basically, the entire album I like. And I like that it's pretty experimental. It's got peaks and valleys in sound versus in rock, which is pretty uniform.
Yeah, it has, because in No No No, it's got that kind of groove when it kind of rolls back, and you've got the guitar solo, which is really relaxed and not what you'd expect, and the bass lines and everything. It's a very interesting album. But what'd be interesting, because obviously in the US you had a different track listing, because you did have Strange Kind of Woman on it, whereas we had Demon's Eye on it, which was the B-side. So in the US, because I would have thought, I guess, because when I was younger, I thought, why have they put Anyone's Daughter on it when they could have shuffled that one off and put Demon's Eye or the single Strange Kind of Woman on it? It would have made it a more cohesive rock album. But in the US, you didn't know that Demon's Eye existed, did you? Unless you bought the single, I guess.
The one place that we had it fairly regularly. So I'm in Canada. I'm not sure how this lines up with the US, but we had that 24 karat purple compilation.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
That had Demon's Eye on it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And Demon's Eye, it's a funny one. It's a little bit for me like Black Knight in that on the surface, I should like it a lot because it's heavy. But Demon's Eye has just a little bit too much ordinariness towards the blues. And Black Knight seems, even though it's more Sabbathy, Black Knight to me sounded a little underwritten, a little undercooked. Like it sounds like Evil Woman, don't you play your games with those, games with me by Sabbath,
it's right? The same kind of shuffle, hasn't it? Yeah.
So, to me, I don't know if it would be particularly improved this album with Demon's Eye versus Strange Kind of Woman. It'd be about the same.
Okay. My number 6 is actually another live album, and it's Live in London. Now, I could have chosen Made in Europe or Live in Paris because they're all from that period. The reason why I chose Live in London, which doesn't have the best production, is that I feel that Ritchie Blackmore's guitar sound in 1974 was almost unique to that point. You could say that between 74 and 76, he had a specific style that he was kind of developing, almost like this speed, guitar playing that he did. But the way he plays You Fall No One, the way he does that staccato riff, was never the same apart from here. Even on Made in Europe, it's not quite, which of course it morphed into Still I'm Sad from Rainbow, didn't it? But it kind of, to me, the solo piece on here, the guitar sound, the version of Burn, the intro to Mistreated. This was like a band on fire to me. I saw them on this tour. I was very young, and it just changed everything. So Made in Europe always felt a bit disjointed, whereas this is kind of, it's not a perfect mix. They haven't got the master tapes anymore. It is what it is. And this version without Space Trucking, which was a bit of a self-indulgent vehicle for Mr. Hughes to go for it. This obviously is more concise. And you've got obviously Might Just Take Your Life, which is a much heavier take than the studio version, Lay Down, Stay Down, and Smoke on the Water, You Fool No One. But that would be my number 6, a live album, Live in London.
Man, I love listening to you talk about this live stuff and these specifics on these albums, because I don't know any of that stuff. And I've always said that I would like to see like a Led Zeppelin expert just listen to all those ridiculous boots and everything all over the place and put together a perfect like 4 CD box set of really specific versions that are amazing. And this is the most amazing time John Bonham did this, and this is the most John Paul Jones moment that you don't hear on any studio albums or other livers. So it'd be incredible to see a show from you where you go through and like maybe like the top 30 live renditions, different arrangements when Ritchie's on fire, like you say, versus not, I mean, I've never this is another thing a buddy of mine said once that I thought was really interesting. When you're going to analyze an album, listen to it 5 times, listen to it only for the vocals, listen to it only for the guitar solos, listen to it only for the drums, put everything else out of your mind. Right. So live albums is a perfect example of that. Like when you said he was on fire this night and he was not on this night. It's like, I would never have picked that out because I would probably listen to that record and not even compare which songs are from Germany and which are from Birmingham. And then I would definitely never listen to it and go, okay, I'm only going to listen to his solos. Right. So yeah, it'd be neat to have someone point out with some of these major bands, like, this is what you got to go listen to on this live album specifically. Right.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you for the inspiration on that. I should definitely do that.
Thank
you. So number 5.
Yes, my number 5 is Perpendicular. I loved when they got together and did this. I thought it was just a great renewal for the band. You could tell everybody was enthusiastic. There was a new creativity. I've never had any problem with Steve Morris. I thought he was great. The main reason people have a problem with him is when they see him live and he doesn't do what Ritchie normally does and that kind of thing, right? And he has his own specific toolbox that he goes to, and he does certain things like I love that little, it's a cliche of his, but between notes, he'll give you a fill, right? He'll do it. He'll do a a little staccato thing that he does, right? And he does that all the time. But so I thought the songwriting was really good. It was heavy, and they're getting into that realm that they've always been into now, where, again, like the production as a metaphor, you can't tell whether the songs are heavy or not. You're going, well, that sounds like, they're doing all that grinding, doing this and this circular riff and all that. But then the next song is like, it's a little barrel housey, but it's still heavy, and the organ's still heavy. So it's a weird thing with modern day Deep Purple where they're being so crafty and sophisticated that it's getting harder to split it into the heavy songs and the not heavy songs.
Yeah. Fantastic.
So this is the exciting first step thing. It's the King Crimson Discipline.
Well,
right?
my number 5 is Perpendicular.
All right.
So we're actually, the planets are aligned for this one. Both of us agree. This is number 5. I think when I bought this, I just loved it straight away. In fact, Ted the Mechanic was probably the one that I wasn't actually sure about to start with. But then as the rest of the songs started rolling out of the speakers, Loosen My Strings and obviously The Aviator, which was so unusual for what you expected. And, and obviously other stuff, the Hey Cisco, the interplay between Steve Morse and John Lord. John Lord just sounded so energized, so up in the mix. Those kind of twin lines they did where they sounded like they were trying to outdo each other. As the years have rolled by, it makes you realize just what a fantastic new start and valuable album this is in the Deep Purple canon. Of course, and sometimes I feel like screaming, which I wish was still in the set now. It was the instant classic I feel from this album, and Steve's guitar solo on that particular song was always absolutely top notch. In fact, nice. I kind of played with the idea if there was a live album actually from that period called Olympia 96. And the set list on that was the other thing, wasn't it? They were just free to put so many different songs in the set without, Richie sort of vetoing all these different choices they wanted to do. Great period for the band.
Yeah. Although Ian still vetoes, right? So, so it's like, I remember asking him once, it's like, why don't you play something off of Burn or whatever, Stormbringer,
Oh, he won't do that.
He like got his back up. It's like, oh, why would I do that? I didn't write those or whatever, right? It's like, well, you do those and the fans would love it. They would talk, the internet would blow up, it'd be so cool. Like, so what? You didn't write it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Sam, he didn't write Hush, did he? And, that one rolls in. But I suppose because he sang it once. So it feels like it's part of the set, I guess.
And they've been known to do covers too, right? So other covers. So, yeah.
Very true.
Okay, so my next choice is probably a little bit contrarian and not expected, but Abandon. I have always loved this album. This one just always hit me right off the bat. I feel like it's not one of Roger's, even though Roger thinks it is. Roger says it's the difficult second album. I don't think so at all. I think, the likes of Seventh Heaven, Watching the Sky, it's got some good, epic, heavy songs. I think the production is back to a little bit where you can really hear that heaviness. And what I always tell people is, go later on into the album to the likes of She Was, What's Her Name, 69, Evil Louie. When you get to the end of this album, it does not fade. It stays bold and heavy and epic and interesting with big powerful drums and big organ. And it's a Roger Glover production. Any Fool Know That. Again, it's a little bit like the Ted the Mechanic, where you're not sure. It's a little bit on the funky side, but I think the album just absolutely picks up after that and doesn't let up. So I feel this is even more exciting than Perpendicular.
Yeah, well, that is a very good album, especially Seventh Heaven. It's a very heavy album, isn't it? I remember when I bought it. It was in '98, wasn't it? I just thought, wow, this is the heaviest thing they've ever done. But you're right, as you go through the album and you get to tracks like 69, again, there's lots of good interplay between Morse and John Lord. Yeah, it's a very good album. My number 4 is Deep Purple in Rock. which is the first Deep Purple album I ever bought. I'd gone off trying to find Machine Head and then got it. I didn't know anything about this at all. And just thought, well, I need to come home with something with Deep Purple on the front. And so I took a chance with this. And it's weird. It sounded an old grungy rock album back then in the mid-70s to me. It sounded from its time. But now when I played, maybe because there's so many other bands that tried to emulate it, it sounds just as wild as it did then. I mean, in the States, of course, or in Canada, maybe it was the same, but the way Speaking opens is just a cacophony of noise, which my dad hated, so I loved it even more. But I know in the US version they took that off, so you never heard that. Was the Canadian version the same?
No, I believe the one I've always been used to all my life has the cacophony of noise. What is this particular copy? I don't even know if this is my original copy. I think what am I looking at here? But yeah, in my head, I'm looking at a Canadian copy here. So I certainly kind of remember that. Yeah. So I honestly can't remember the answer to that. So,
but it's Everything Hard Loving Man, as Gang was probably the first kind of song to have that like kind of riff, and the guitar solo, which sounds like the guitar's being strangled. And there's a drip of a tap at the very end. And it goes from speaker to speaker in those good old days when stereo meant stereo. It's superb, absolutely defining rock album for the genre of heavy metal, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So my number 3 is also in rock. I refuse to call it Deep Purple in rock. I've never liked that. But I love it to death. I'll say one thing first of all. So I have this nagging, boring, stupid sort of predilection all the time, where most bands I usually fall into the 75 to 79 for my favorites. And I have this problem sometimes with a lot of older albums. My Sabbath is even worse. I'm not a fan much at all of the first album. I put Paranoid low in my list, and for some reason I'm not a big Volume 4 fan. So the funny thing about this one is I like when you called it an old grungy album, because to me, the negative here is that the production is really harsh and mid-rangey. It does sound kind of like, sounds a little old. It's got a few jammy qualities. I'm famously not a big Child in Time fan. It's got a few bluesy qualities, but not much. But what I will say that's amazing about it, and why it's my number 3. So I wrote this book called Who Invented Heavy Metal, which is 120,000 words that ends in 1971. It's a long, long book, right? Wow. And so I have this theory, putting all the early stuff aside, when I'm asked for the short answer, what invented heavy metal? It's Black Sabbath in February 70. It's this in is this October, November 70?
I think so. Yeah.
I always get them mixed up. So it's Uriah Heep, Very Heavy, Very Humble in June 70. And then it's Paranoid in again, November, I think 70. So it's those 4 albums, right? And because Sabbath's got 2 and Paranoid is really heavy, I usually say Black Sabbath invented heavy metal, because really that first album does invent heavy metal. But out of all 4 of those albums, I think this is the most modern and forward-thinking and heaviest.
Yeah,
so,
totally agree.
So it is so well put together in terms of creating a new kind of music, just start to finish. Hard Loving Man, I always say it's like that's the invention of Iron Maiden right there with the heavy metal gallop. And you've got, Bloodsucker with that crazy riff. Speed King is heavy enough. It's got a hint of the blues to it. Flight of the Rat is like almost like Judas Priest Sinner. It's this kind of marriage of melodicness and super heaviness. And the rest of it's all heavy, except for Child in Time, which I think is the outlier song on it, right? But of course, many Deep Purple fans, as we found out, really love Child in Time and rate it maybe their favorite Deep Purple song of all time. So credit to that. And then that only leaves Into the Fire and Live and Wreck, which are both modern heavy songs as well. So yeah, if this would have come out in February 70, it would have been no contest to me. I would have said Deep Purple invented heavy metal.
Fantastic. Well, my number 3 is, I know, not one of your faves, but it's the last live album in my list, and it's made in Japan. Yes, it does contain only one of two drum solos I can now cope with in 2023. This one by the Mule, and the other one would be Lee Kerslake for the Gypsy from 1973 by Uriah Heep. But my love of this album is for Highway Star, Strange Kind of Woman, Child in Time, the definitive version of Smoke on the Water, and Lazy, and of course the entire side 4 of Space Trucking, which at the time when I first ever heard this, I didn't realize it was borrowing from Mandrake Roots and lots of other things, and Falls by from Fireball. I just thought it was one enormous improvisation. But I still feel that everything about it, from the shiny gold cover, this kind of, it had this kind of image. It was £3.25 when I bought it. And everything about it to me makes it, as many people do, one of the best live albums of all time. And I still dip into this. I don't play it from end to end. The other day I dipped into the big box version and played the Tokyo version of Strange Kind of Woman. But I still think, again, Highway Star, this is the definitive version. And I'll admit now that Machine Head isn't in my list, not because I don't like it. In fact, I have more copies of Machine Head than any other Deep Purple album. But this, to me, had so much from Machine Head, it became the version of Machine Head that I preferred to hear. That's my number 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten into many arguments about I don't like big, long, jammy live albums, right? I was very disappointed as a kid getting Rainbow on stage, and I don't like Song Remains the Same, right? So that's the thing. And that's when we got in this big argument. I followed up that list with, well, if, here's an interesting idea. If Child in Time is your favorite Deep Purple song, maybe you don't like what Deep Purple normally does all the time. Maybe you don't like Deep Purple, right? And then that caused hundreds of comments, right? And so people, one guy shot back and he made a lot of sense. It's like, well, if you don't like extended versions of songs, maybe you don't like Deep Purple. So I thought that was pretty funny too. It's kind of true, right? And then I remember one guy said, I don't even know if this is true, but I don't think it's true, but he said, Child in Time was the first song Ian Gillan ever wrote with Deep Purple, right? And then I said, well, if maybe that's why he left Deep Purple, because it turned out that Deep Purple wasn't what he thought it was, because they don't have 7 Child in Times.
Yeah,
right?
I guess, because in a way, Child in Time for me in rock, when they did it live, it followed the same format. I know early versions, they stuck an extra keyboard solo in, but basically it followed the same format. And I think when they started releasing some of the early Mark II stuff, where you had Ring That Necker, which was extended from 7 minutes to 40 minutes or something, I also struggle with that. Or the really long versions of Mandrake Root, I really struggle with those interpretations. I think by the time they got to 72 with Made in Japan, they were still extending songs, but it felt more structured and not so ego-driven as some of the earlier extended kind of soloing that went on. So I feel as if I can meet you along the path there. I do think the early kind of 1970 some of the Scandinavian Nights and some of these other live albums, where they do seem to go on for longer than was necessary to, maybe there was strobe lighting going on in the background, or, who knows. But I feel that by the time they got to 72, 74, they were reining it in a bit. And of course now they still jam a little bit, but they certainly don't go off too far away from the chosen path of the whatever song it is they're playing.
Funny, one time on Facebook we were arguing about Made in Japan, and I made up my version of it, right? And every song was in brackets edit, right? And so I had like a nine song version of Made in Japan that was,
that's fair enough. Yeah,
two sides, right?
Yeah,
funny. So okay, so my number 2 is Machine Head. Love it to death. I think this is the very best you ever got of the guitar organ alloy from Deep Purple in terms of a production sense and even a playing sense. I love the production on this. The production's amazing for 1972, I think. But also when I do mention that, I always give Purple a little bit of stick, because I think Gypsy by Uriah Heep, first song they ever did, literally gets the guitar organ alloy better than Deep Purple ever would across 22 albums. And I think Look at Yourself recorded in 71, sounds better than Machine Head. And it also gets all of that alloy better, and the performance. I mean, literally Look at Yourself is the best Deep Purple album that Deep Purple never made. I mean, I think if people look at Uriah Heep as a copycat version of Purple, it's like occasionally they exceeded what Deep Purple did, but it's only occasionally, and they have a long catalog, and they screwed up a lot more than Deep Purple ever did, right?
I always felt that they were kind of following Deep Purple. They were about 6 months behind, because it's interesting you say that Look at Yourself was kind of like almost like similar to Machine Head. I felt it was following in rock in its style, a bit like Salisbury had the orchestral track on. I always felt they were just slightly behind.
But it's funny, Very Heavy, Very Humble is middle of 1970, right? And In Rock is late 1970.
That's true, yeah.
So,
I mean, very true. Very true.
Actually beat Deep Purple at their own game better than anything they would ever do with Gypsy and arguably Prey. That's pretty incredible. So, and then you hear the things about how they're, recording, right, or rehearsing.
Yeah, that's right. They were next to each other, weren't they?
So I don't know who's copying who or whatever. I don't think it particularly matters. And of course, Mick Box always says, you ask Mick Box, and his pat answer is always like, well, what's the difference between you guys and Deep Purple? He says, well, we have 5 singers. They had 1. It's always funny, right? But so I'll go with Machine Head. I think Highway Star is way up the list of greatest songs ever did. Maybe I'm a Leo is way up the list. That one might not be for a lot of people. Pictures of Home, I think when I did my top 20, I think I rated it the second favorite Deep Purple song. I love the gothicness and the way it roils, and the organ's amazing in it. Smoke on the Water, I'm less of a fan of. I don't think the verses are very good, but the riff itself is iconic. Lazy, I've gotten in arguments with people about that one because I don't want to hear Deep Purple doing the blues. My theory is heavy metal is invented when you start taking the blues out of it. So when you go post-British blues boom, Sabbath barely ever did the blues. I don't care what anybody says. Deep Purple didn't do the blues very often. I got in an argument with a guy about that, who his name was Gordon something on Facebook, and he went and listed all the Deep Purple and Rainbow songs that were blues, and I disagreed with him. I said about a third of these are blues. Yeah. You have a loose interpretation. What's the blues? I have a tighter one, whatever, right? But I definitely am not a Lazy fan, and I don't like that it's super long. And I think Space Truckin's an absolute masterpiece. So unfortunately only 7 songs. Never Before is the one everybody complains about on this record, right? It's a little undercooked. It's a little mainstreamy, right? It's the one that people do, historically complain about. But I think the performances are amazing. The production's amazing. And most of the songs, I love.
And do you think it would have changed the dynamic if they'd stuck the ballad on it, When a Blind Man Cries? Do you think that? Well,
I would have liked it less, for sure, because A, it's a ballad. I'm not a ballad guy, and B, it's a little bluesy, right? So no, I wouldn't have wanted it on here. But maybe another song. What do we got here? We got 20. It's a long album. It's 30. It's almost 38 minutes.
Yeah, so there wasn't really much room, was
as it is. Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Well, my number 2 is Come Taste the Band.
Wow.
Which will be a surprise for many people.
I had that at 18 out of 22.
But I was horrified when Blackmore left Deep Purple. I just thought it was the end of days. And when this unheard of American joined them, and I couldn't find anything out about him at the time, and I was quite late to the party. I didn't go and see them live almost because I just couldn't believe that they would even dare play live without Richie Blackmore. But when I did hear it, it was such a different type of album, and the production. And this is a period, I think, when Ian Pace, between this album and Malice in Wonderland by Pace, Ash and Lord, was personally on fire. His drum patterns, and he was locking in with Glenn Hughes, that obviously was completely at ease with Tommy Bolin. Coverdale's voice sounded richer, and Martin Birch's production just seemed to bring out the best in the band. John Lord obviously took a back seat as they wanted to let Tommy Bolin find his way forwards. But the opening track, Coming Home, bit like I said earlier, track 1, side 1 of any Deep Purple album, just races out the gates. I think Coming Home is fantastic. Getting Tighter, great riff. Dealer and Drifter is just immaculate. And the you keep on moving. Yes, it's a ballad, but the guitar solo and the way it's the feel, the emotive feel of the songs over the years, it's just I've just grown closer to it, everything about it, and I still play it a great deal.
Nice. Yeah, it's one that I really don't play that much, and when I go back to it, I'm not crazy about the songs. I don't think Tommy Bolin has a particular sound. We argue about that. Everybody's always, I feel like I feel like we often over romanticize these guys when they die, sort of thing. And I'm not a big fan of I love Coming Home on it and a couple other ones. And I appreciate that it's heavy, as a kid, all through life, I always loved it more than Stormbringer. But okay. So my last choice, Perfect Strangers, or Perfect Wheelchairs, as Kerrang called it. Remember that? I thought that was funny. It's like 40 years ago now that they're like calling them Perfect Wheelchairs, right? But we did one of our very earliest shows of our YouTube channel, The Contrarians, was a Deep Purple episode, and I ranked this my favorite Deep Purple album then. And my main argument was always that when I looked at these Deep Purple albums, and again, it almost feels a little bit like that with the Bob Ezrin era too. But mathematically speaking, I like way more songs on this than most of those older albums, and that's why it just barely edges out Machine Head, because Machine Head's got Lazy and it's got Never Before and it's only got 7 songs. That's basically it, right? But I love everything on here except Wasted Sunsets and Hungry Days lets the side down a little bit. But everything else, only 8 songs. So love Knocking at Your Back Door, Under the Guns, good heavy one. Nobody's Home is one of those circular, Richie, down to earth rainbow riffs kind of thing. Mean Streak, I like as well. Perfect Strangers, absolute classic. The Big Egypto thing, the big dramatic, part where the time signature switching back.
Yeah, that's kind of the Zeppelin-esque bit.
Yeah. And of course, Knocking at Your Back Door's got the big Jaws sort of intro to it, right? I just think they did an amazing job with this. I love that it went platinum. Pretty cool. I didn't like that it broke up Rainbow, because I really liked that Rainbow direction. Not all of the Joe Lynn Turner, but once you get to the last one, that one felt like a really cool kind of almost concept album. I really like artistically Bent Out of Shape better than
I totally agree. I think Bent Out of Shape, I was also the same. I felt like they were just on the cusp of breaking through and knowing where they were going. And Perfect Strangers would made my list at number 11, and Fireball at number 12, etc. But I did feel that I was a bit disappointed, because I felt that Richie was kind of just following the money. But I can't deny that things like Perfect Strangers, Knocking at Your Back Door, and of course Under the Gun, Richie Blackmore's guitar sound was in your face. It was really thick and meaty, and he was doing all that kind of Snake Charmer Egyptian type style, and it is a very, very strong album. And of course, it was such a massive success, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, my number 1 album is Burn.
Nice. Yep.
And I just, as you said earlier when you picked it in your list, I just think it's perfect. I do know what you mean about side 2. In some ways, Mistreated was the last of the big classic tracks in a way. And I know Rainbow went off and with Ronnie James Dio made it their own as well. A200 has a fantastic guitar solo in it, aside from the Doctor Who kind of 70s sci-fi soundtrackisms in it. But it has moments in it. But I do like what's going on here, again, from the guitar rather than the honky-tonk piano. But You Fool No One. But I agree that side 1 is just perfect. And I think you mentioned that Sail Away were Led Zeppelin listening to that before they did Trampled Underfoot. And it does make you wonder, because it is such an amazing song. The restraint, the way the song is structured, when in the hands of anyone just being a typical hard rock or metal band, I don't think they would have had that kind of light or shade of approach to arranging a song like that. The sequencing of the album. But of course, to me, it all comes down to the one song, really, which is Burn, which I think is just unique in the Deep Purple canon of opening songs, next to maybe Highway Star. But it's just the complexity, the vision, and the kind of inspiration they must have when they pulled that together. They must have all been involved, and it must have been amazing to have been in the room when they started to look at each other and think, do you know what? I think we have something here. Lyrically, I'm not quite sure what it's about, but you just believe all the words. Whatever's David's singing about, you believe it. And they all laughed until she said, "Burn, I believe him." And so just, it's just absolutely superb album.
Yeah. Wicked. Nice.
So that's our top 10 Deep Purple albums, and you've made me, probably after this I should probably go and play Abandon and reacquaint myself with that.
Yeah. I'll just give you a quick rundown because I did it anyway.
Yeah.
So at 11 I had Bananas, 12 Infinite, 13 Who Do We Think We Are, 14 Now What, 15 Stormbringer, 16 Battle Rages On, 17 Rapture the Deep, 18 Come Taste the Band, 19 Turning to Crime. I thought that was just a terrible choice of songs. I've had a whole rant about that. I think I did a podcast episode about, it reminds me of Rush Feedback, right? Picking songs that no Deep Purple fan wants to hear you guys do. I don't want to hear anybody ever do White Room ever again. And then I had basically the entire Mark 1 at the bottom, including the classical album, if but I didn't put it in because it's a live album. So that's my bottom.
I did. I only went down as far as 20, and some of mine include live albums. So some of those my Mark 1s would have been outside of the top 20, but in concert 72 was at 20, Battle Rage is on 19, Whoosh 18, Total Abandon, which is another live album, at number 17, Made in Europe, Slaves and Masters at 15, Perfect Strangers, Machine Head and Fireball. But yeah, it's really, that's fantastic list. But I think the thing is about being a Deep Purple fan, or fan of any band in particular, is keeping that sense of wonder that when you first discovered them, that you're actually wanting the band to push your comfort zone so that you are being led down to different things. You don't want if you're an AC/DC fan, you don't want them to deviate at all from the path. But for Deep Purple, I want them to deviate a little bit. But I am with you on the Covers album. I just felt that was going to be a bit of a disappointment, and I tried to be enthusiastic about it when I did my review, and I was to a point, but I don't play it very much now. Well, I don't play it at the moment. It hasn't been pulled out of the rack for a long time. And when they did Roadhouse Blues as well, I thought, they didn't need to do that. And I thought that was surely they must have had something else in the can they could have done. But there you have it.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for joining me today. It's been absolutely pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we can.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we can talk about another band or another period, and do this again, and keep
absolutely.
me and keep me informed with that. Where's the best place actually for people to buy your books?
MartinPopoff.com. There's PayPal buttons there for everything, for international, US, Canada, anything that's in print. I have I have a supply of, so, there's probably 80-ish different titles that are available. Latest one was the AC/DC at 50. That's the big hardcover one.
Yeah. That looks really good.
Yeah. So, that's the place I sign them, ship them all out from here in Toronto.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for tuning in. And a huge thank you to my guest, Martin Popoff, for sharing his top 10 Deep Purple albums with me. Please check out the Now Spinning magazine website at nowspinning.co.uk. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please subscribe to the podcast as well. Share with like-minded people. See us on social media. Join the Facebook private community where you can talk to other music collectors from around the world. Take care, keep spinning those records, and I shall see you very, very soon.